The knock came at 7:43 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Mark Wilson stood frozen in his kitchen, a half-eaten microwave dinner cooling on the counter. He wasn't expecting anyone. His daughter Lily was spending the holiday with her mother and new stepfather in Colorado. The apartment was silent except for the faint sound of "It's a Wonderful Life" playing on the television, a tradition he couldn't bring himself to break, even alone. Another knock, more insistent this time. Mark wiped his hands on his worn sweatpants and moved toward the door, wondering who would visit on Christmas Eve. When he opened it, the last person he expected to see was Catherine Reynolds, his boss of 3 years, standing in the hallway with snow in her hair and arms full of wrapped presents. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content that reminds us all of the unexpected ways love can enter our lives when we need it most. Mark had always been the first to arrive at Reynolds Marketing each morning, unlocking the office before anyone else. It was easier that way, to lose himself in work before the chaos of single parenthood resumed each evening. What he never realized was how closely Catherine had been watching him slowly withdraw from life after his divorce 2 years ago. "Catherine? What are you doing here?" Mark asked, confusion evident in his tired eyes. She smiled, snowflakes melting on her eyelashes. "I thought you could use some company. No one should be alone on Christmas Eve." The truth was, Mark Wilson had been alone long before Christmas Eve arrived. His world had collapsed when Sarah, his wife of 12 years, announced she'd fallen in love with someone else. The divorce had been quick but devastating, leaving him with joint custody of their 10-year-old daughter Lily and a hollowness that seemed to grow with each passing month. Work became his refuge, the one place where he still felt competent, in control. Catherine Reynolds had built her marketing agency from nothing into one of the most respected boutique firms in the city. At 42, she was known for her brilliant campaigns and no-nonsense leadership style. What few people saw was her remarkable capacity for noticing the quiet struggles of others. She had watched Mark's transformation from a vibrant team leader to a man who moved through life like a ghost, showing up only for his daughter and his job. "I can't accept all this," Mark said, staring at the packages she'd placed under his sparse Christmas tree, one he'd put up only because Lily had begged him to keep their traditions alive, even though she wouldn't be there to see it. "You don't have a choice," Catherine replied, removing her coat to reveal a festive red sweater. "Besides, most of these are for Lily when she returns. I just thought you might want to have them ready." Mark felt something crack inside him, the wall he'd carefully constructed to keep his emotions contained. "How did you know? You mentioned Lily would be with her mother this year. And I've noticed you haven't taken a single day off since the divorce. It wasn't hard to figure out you'd be alone tonight." What Mark didn't know was that Catherine understood loneliness intimately. Her own marriage had ended 5 years earlier, and she had no children. Christmas had become just another day to work from home, until this year, when she decided someone else's holiday mattered more than her own solitude. The evening unfolded slowly, awkwardly at first. Catherine had brought ingredients for a proper Christmas dinner, dismissing Mark's protests that she didn't need to cook for him. As she moved around his kitchen with surprising ease, Mark found himself talking, really talking, for the first time in months. About Lily's struggles adjusting to the divorce. About the emptiness of the apartment without his daughter's laughter. About his fear that he was failing as a father. "You're not failing," Catherine said firmly, handing him a glass of wine. "You're surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" Mark asked, the question hanging between them. Catherine paused, considering her words carefully. "Surviving means you're still here, still showing up. It's the first step toward living again." The dinner she prepared was simple but delicious: roast chicken, potatoes, and vegetables that made Mark realize how long he'd been subsisting on takeout and frozen meals. As they ate, Catherine shared stories about her own divorce, her voice softening as she described the loneliness that followed. "The hardest part wasn't losing him," she admitted. "It was losing the future I thought we'd have. The holidays, the anniversaries, the ordinary Tuesdays, suddenly they all looked different. Mark nodded, understanding perfectly. Lily asked if we could still be a family for Christmas. I didn't know how to tell her that some broken things stay broken. Catherine's eyes met his across the table. Not everything that breaks stays broken, Mark. After dinner, they moved to the living room where Catherine insisted they watch the remainder of It's a Wonderful Life. Mark found himself watching her more than the movie, the way she mouthed certain lines, how she blinked back tears during the final scene. He'd worked for her for 3 years but realized he knew very little about Catherine Reynolds outside the office. "Why did you really come here tonight?" he asked when the credits rolled. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. "Because 2 years ago, my sister found me in my apartment on Christmas Eve, staring at the wall. I'd convinced myself I was fine being alone. She knew better." She turned to face him fully. "Sometimes we need someone to remind us that we matter, that we're not forgotten." What neither of them said aloud was how the evening had shifted something between them, blurring the lines between boss and employee, between two people who had only ever exchanged professional courtesies. As midnight approached, Catherine gathered her coat. "I should go. You probably need some rest." Mark walked her to the door, words failing him. How could he explain that this had been the first night in 2 years he hadn't felt the crushing weight of his failures? That for a few hours, his apartment had felt like a home again? "Thank you," he said simply. "Not just for dinner, but for..." He gestured vaguely, unable to articulate everything she had given him. Catherine smiled, understanding in her eyes. "Merry Christmas, Mark." On impulse, he reached for her hand. "Would you," he began, then stopped, unsure of himself. "Would I what?" she prompted gently. "Would you want to come back tomorrow? For Christmas Day? I mean, unless you have plans." "I'm sure you have plans." Catherine's smile widened. "I'd like that very much." After she left, Mark stood in his living room, looking at the presents she'd brought, the dishes they'd shared, the evidence that for one evening, he hadn't been alone. He picked up his phone and texted Lily a goodnight message, adding something he hadn't said in too long: "I can't wait to see you when you get back. I have a friend I'd like you to meet." The weeks that followed weren't a fairy tale. Mark and Catherine moved cautiously, aware of the complications their workplace relationship could create. There were awkward moments at the office, careful boundaries established and respected. But there were also coffee breaks that lasted longer than necessary, text messages that had nothing to do with work, and weekend outings that included Lily, who took to Catherine with unexpected enthusiasm. By Valentine's Day, Mark found himself standing in a florist shop, agonizing over roses versus lilies, wondering when exactly his boss had become the woman he couldn't stop thinking about. Catherine had awakened something in him he thought had died with his marriage, the capacity to look forward rather than back. When spring arrived, Mark received a job offer from a competing agency, better pay, better title. He agonized over the decision, knowing that accepting might clear the path for a relationship with Catherine without workplace complications. When he finally told her about the offer, her response surprised him. "Take it," she said without hesitation. "You deserve it." "But what about?" He gestured between them, the unspoken thing that had been growing for months. Catherine smiled. "Some things are worth figuring out, Mark. We'll figure it out." On his last day at Reynolds Marketing, Catherine handed him a small wrapped package. Inside was a snow globe containing a miniature Christmas tree. "To remind you," she said simply. That night, he invited her to dinner at his apartment, the first time they'd been alone there since Christmas Eve. Lily was with her mother, the apartment spotless, a proper meal prepared. As they ate, Mark realized how much had changed in just a few months. The hollowness was gone, replaced by something tentative but growing stronger each day. "I never thanked you properly," he said as they sat on the couch after dinner. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For showing up at my door when I needed someone most." Catherine's hand found his. I saw you because I knew what to look for. Sometimes the people hurting the most are the ones who never ask for help. Mark leaned forward, finally allowing himself to kiss her, not as an employee, not as a friend, but as a man who had found his way back to living rather than just surviving. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, Mark stood in the kitchen of a new house, one with enough room for him, Lily, and, increasingly often, Catherine. He was preparing dinner while Lily and Catherine decorated cookies at the table, their laughter filling the space that had once been so empty. "Dad, Catherine's doing it wrong," Lily protested, though her smile betrayed her mock outrage. "You can't put blue sprinkles on Santa's beard." "Who says Santa can't be fashion-forward?" Catherine replied, adding more blue sprinkles defiantly. Mark watched them, these two people who had become his world. Lily, growing so fast, healing from the wounds of the divorce in ways he hadn't thought possible. And Catherine, who had shown him that broken things could indeed be mended, though they might look different afterward. The doorbell rang, and Lily raced to answer it. Mark's parents had arrived for the holiday, followed by Catherine's sister and her family. The house filled with voices, with warmth, with the chaos of a blended family finding its way. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Mark and Catherine sat alone by the Christmas tree. "Do you remember last year?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Every minute," she replied. "I was so nervous standing at your door. I almost turned around 3 times. I'm glad you didn't." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "Me too." Mark reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the small velvet box he'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "I have something for you. I wasn't going to do this until tomorrow, but—" Catherine's eyes widened as he shifted to face her, box in hand. "You showed up at my door when I was at my lowest," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You reminded me that life goes on, that hearts heal, that love can find us even when we're not looking for it." He opened the box, revealing a diamond ring. "Catherine Reynolds, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her. When she could speak, she said simply, "Yes. 1,000 times yes." As they embraced, snow began to fall outside, coating the world in quiet beauty. Mark thought about the journey that had brought them here, from the depths of loneliness to this moment overflowing with possibility. All because one Christmas Eve, when he thought he'd been forgotten by the world, someone had cared enough to knock on his door. Sometimes love arrives when we least expect it, in packages we never anticipated. Sometimes the people who see us most clearly are the ones who recognize their own pain in our eyes. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can receive is the reminder that we are worthy of being found, even when we've lost ourselves. As Catherine and Mark fell asleep that night, wrapped in each other's arms, the snow continued to fall, covering the old year and making way for the new, a blank page waiting to be filled with their story, still being written, one day at a time. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing stories of hope, healing, and unexpected love that remind us all that even in our darkest moments, we're never truly alone. Thank you for watching, and may your own holidays be filled with the warmth of connection and the promise of new beginnings. The following Christmas was unlike any Mark had experienced before. The house he now shared with Catherine and Lily, during her scheduled time, was decorated from top to bottom, not with the sparse, obligatory decorations of previous years, but with handmade ornaments, twinkling lights, and 3 stockings hanging from the mantel. Their wedding was planned for spring, but already they felt like a family. "Dad, can we open just one present tonight?" Lily asked, her eyes bright with excitement. At 12, she was at that precious age between childhood and adolescence, still believing in the magic of Christmas while beginning to understand its deeper meanings. "You know the rules," Mark replied with mock sternness. "Christmas Eve is for hot chocolate and stories. Presents are for tomorrow." Catherine entered the living room carrying a tray of steaming mugs. I might have smuggled in a small Christmas Eve gift tradition from my family, she said with a conspiratorial wink at Lily. Mark raised an eyebrow. Oh really? Undermining parental authority already? It's called being the cool stepmom-to-be, Catherine replied, setting down the tray. In my family, we always got to open one gift on Christmas Eve, new pajamas to wear that night. Lily's face lit up. Can we, Dad? Please. Mark pretended to consider it seriously before breaking into a smile. I suppose some traditions are worth adopting. As Lily tore into the package Catherine handed her, Mark was struck by how different this Christmas felt. Last year, Catherine had rescued him from solitude. This year, they were building something new together, not trying to recreate what was lost, but forging ahead into uncharted territory. The pajamas tradition was a hit, with all three of them changing into their new sleepwear before settling in for their Christmas Eve movie. Lily fell asleep halfway through, her head resting against Catherine's shoulder. Mark watched them, his heart full. Should we wake her? Catherine whispered. Mark shook his head. Let's carry her up together. After tucking Lily into bed, they returned to the living room, where the Christmas tree lights cast a soft glow across the room. Mark pulled Catherine close, breathing in the scent of her hair. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For making us a family again. Different, but whole. Catherine looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the twinkling lights. You know, when I came to your door last Christmas, I wasn't trying to save you. No? She shook her head. I was trying to save myself too. I'd been hiding in my work for so long, convincing myself I was complete on my own. But seeing you at the office every day, watching you fight to stay afloat for Lily's sake, it made me realize how much I was missing. Mark brushed a strand of hair from her face. So we saved each other. I think that's how it's supposed to work, she replied. They stayed up late that night, arranging presents under the tree for Lily, filling stockings, and creating the Christmas morning that had once seemed impossible to Mark. As they worked, Catherine shared stories of her childhood Christmases, and Mark found himself opening up about holiday traditions from before his marriage had fallen apart. We should invite Sarah and her husband for dinner sometime, Catherine said unexpectedly as they finished with the presents. Mark looked at her in surprise. Really? You'd want that? Catherine nodded. For Lily's sake. She shouldn't have to compartmentalize her life. We're all adults. We can model healthy relationships for her. It was moments like these that reminded Mark why he had fallen in love with Catherine, her emotional intelligence, her generosity of spirit, her ability to see beyond conventional boundaries to what truly mattered. You're remarkable, you know that, he said, pulling her into his arms. I'm practical, she corrected him with a smile. And I'm secure enough in what we have to not feel threatened by your past. They fell asleep that night wrapped in each other's arms, the snow falling gently outside their window, creating a peaceful blanket over their neighborhood. Christmas morning arrived with Lily bouncing into their room at an ungodly hour, her excitement impossible to contain. The day unfolded in a blur of torn wrapping paper, delicious food, phone calls to distant relatives, and the comfortable chaos of a holiday spent together. In the afternoon, when Lily was absorbed in her new gifts, Mark pulled Catherine onto the back porch, where the snow had created a winter wonderland in their yard. I have one more gift for you, he said, handing her a small package. Catherine unwrapped it carefully to find a snow globe, similar to the one she had given him when he left her company, but this one contained 3 small figures standing around a Christmas tree. Turn it over, Mark urged. On the base was inscribed, December 24th, the day our story began. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she turned the snow globe upright and watched the flakes swirl around the tiny family. It's perfect, she whispered. I wanted you to have something to remind you of how far we've come, Mark said. And where we're headed. As they stood there, watching the snow fall both inside the globe and outside in their yard, Mark reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, he had been drowning in grief and loneliness, convinced that happiness was something that happened to other people. Now he understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past but about building something new from its lessons. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, exhausted from the excitement of the day, Mark and Catherine sat by the fire, planning their wedding, discussing their future, dreaming aloud in ways Mark had thought he'd never do again. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come to your door last Christmas?" Catherine asked, her head resting on his shoulder. Mark considered the question. "I think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Some connections are inevitable." "That's surprisingly romantic coming from the man who used to avoid the office Christmas party at all costs," she teased. "You've changed me," he admitted. "Or maybe you just reminded me who I was before I got lost." As midnight approached, marking the end of their second Christmas together, Mark realized that the greatest gift wasn't found under the tree. It was the second chance he'd been given, not just at love, but at living fully, at being present, at creating a family that was defined not by what had been lost but by what had been found. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering yesterday's footprints, making way for new ones tomorrow. Inside, the embers of the fire glowed warm and steady, much like the love that had grown between two people who had once been strangers, then colleagues, then friends, and now family. "Merry Christmas, CA."